With that, my name is Emily Miller. I'm the Director of Training and Participant Care here at ACES, and I'm talking to you from Chicago, not too far off the Blue Line in Jefferson Park. So if you are a neighbor, hope you're staying dry. It's been a bit rainy today, so I hope the weather's doing well by you. Now today we are going to start our conversation with some terminology. Then we'll discuss EVV, Electronic Visit Verification and Compliance. Then we're going to go through a couple step-by-steps, how to register for ACES Online, which everyone can do, and then how personal support workers, PSWs, clock in and out live. When live happens, how personal support workers edit or add time as needed. Employers, we'll talk about how you approve or reject time. And for the few of you out there who need to use the IVR, that stands for Interactive Voice Response. I promise you do not need to memorize that. We'll talk about the consumer landline option for EVV compliance that personal support workers use. Now, because we're covering a lot of information, we'll also point you in the direction of resources and reminders. So drink some water, enjoy the presentation. Let's go ahead and get started, everybody. So let's start with some terminology. And that first one is EVV. This stands for Electronic Visit Verification. This is actually a federal rule that came out in 2016, and it requires that personal support workers clock in and out live when providing care. So I'm going to highlight this word live. Okay. So when your shift begins, you clock in. When your shift ends, you clock out. And this is a federal rule. So while I think Illinois is very special, it applies across the board, across the states. The next acronym you may already be familiar with is PSW, which stands for the Personal Support Worker, who delivers services to the consumer. The third is ACES Financial Management Services. So we are the fiscal employer agent. We perform background checks for potential personal support workers. We process payroll and perform required tax functions on behalf of the employer. And what I like to use this opportunity to stress is that ACES is not the employer of the personal support worker. Now, the fourth term you're going to hear me say now and then is something called live-in exempt. This is a status that is applied for annually with supporting documentation. So there's an application and supporting documentation. This is actually what this form, the top of it, looks like. So if a personal support worker meets the requirements, which is defined by the Illinois Division of Developmental Disabilities, DDD, they would not need to be EVV compliant. So if that does apply to you, you the personal support worker, submit this application with supporting documentation. You may not need to be EVV compliant. Now that is something that must be applied for annually. And on our website, we do have both a video and a guide that talks through how to complete that form as well. So that is live-in exempt. Moving to the next slide. The next term is CareAttend, and on the left here is what that mobile app icon looks like. So if you go to the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, that is what the icon looks like for the CareAttend app, which is an app used on a smartphone, a smart device, for live clock in, live clock out, and it's used by personal support workers. Next is the IVR. Again, that stands for Interactive Voice Response System. Think about it like this. Do you remember when you used to call your bank and you put in your social, your date of birth, and then you'd say, press 1 to hear your checking account balance, press 2 to hear your savings account balance. It operates in that same fashion. So this is an option for live clock in, live clock out by placing calls from the consumer's landline telephone for personal support workers who do not have access to a smartphone or smart device. All right, and last term is ACES Online, and the URL or web address is login.mysil.org. This is a web portal. It's used by employers, personal support workers, SDAs, and I apologize, that stands for self-direction assistants, to view the status of time, CANTS expiration dates. CANTS is the annual background check that is completed, to view paid leave balances, payroll schedules, and more. Employers and workers, personal support workers, can use it to manage time as needed, or when the personal support worker has an approved live-in exemption, they can enter their time directly into ACES Online. Now let's dive on in. What is EVV? So we learned that that stands for electronic visit verification, and it comes from a federal mandate that impacts all Medicaid personal support workers across all states. It requires that location is captured when a personal support worker clocks in and when they clock out. So not before, during, or after, just at the time of clock in and the client clock out. Now this requirement of location means that EVV relies on time capture methods through technology. And that's what brings us to the CareAttend app that's used on a smartphone or smart device. Now, if you're not new to the program, let's compare this to what you may be used to over a year ago versus a year ago forward. So it used to be that personal support workers would track their time using a paper timesheet or using online timesheets in ACES Online. Employers, you would sign off on a whole timesheet at once. What's new with EVV, which launched in September of 2023, if you have an approved live-in exemption, nothing changes. Okay, if you have an approved live-in exemption, nothing changes. So if you meet those requirements, the application is approved, which is applied for annually, nothing changes. For those that does not apply to, the big difference is this word live. What this means is personal support workers clock in and out live using the CareAttend app, or they place a call from the consumer's registered landline, that IVR, when their shift begins and ends. As needed when life happens, personal support workers can manually add shifts using ACES Online, though that would not be EVV compliant. Employers, what changes for you? You can sign off on each shift individually if you're available, but you don't have to. You can sign off on time all at once, just like you used to, in the ACES Online portal. So just to summarize, there's really not much of a change at all for employers. You can still log into ACES Online, approve all that time at once. The difference is with personal support workers, if you do not have an approved live-in exemption, you must clock in and clock out live when your shift begins and ends. You'll notice there is no option for paper timesheets if you do not have an approved live-in exemption. I want to talk next about valid versus exception shifts. A valid EVV shift captures 6 elements: the date, the time, the type of service such as attendant or crisis if that applies to you, the service recipient, so the consumer who received services, the service provider who provided the service, the personal support worker, and then here, this is what brings us here today, the location of services. So the location of services at the time that shift began and the time that shift ended. Now, a shift becomes an exception when it is missing one of the elements above, and that is typically going to be the location, for example. An exception is not compliant with EVV requirements. They can still be paid, but they should be avoided as it can result in required training or additional review by the state. So edits should only be made when necessary. So to make valid EVV shifts, personal support workers should clock in and out using the CareAttend app and do not make edits when they are clocking out. Another way to make valid EVV shifts is to clock in and out using the IVR system by making calls from the consumer's landline telephone when your shift begins and when your shift ends. Shifts become an exception when an edit is made, either during clockout in the CareAttend app or later in ACES Online in the portal. If you manually enter a shift directly into the ACES Online portal, that would also not be EVV compliant. Computers are smart, but they're not going to do the location at the beginning of a shift and end of a shift. So it must be done using CareAttend. And if you clock in or clock out calling the IVR system from a phone that is not the consumer's landline telephone, such as a cell phone, a pay phone, laundromat telephone, that is not going to be EVV compliant. That is going to be an exception. So how do you know if a shift is compliant or not? We do display that information for you in ACES Online. So if you come to ACES Online in the desktop view, you can click on More. Okay? And then I realize this is small. this will bring up a pop-up, and there's a whole section called EVV compliant, and it will tell you if it is an exception or not. Okay, so whether you're on desktop or mobile view, you click to expand, you'll click on more, and that brings up a lot of information about that shift, one of which being whether or not it is EVV compliant. If location was captured at the time of clock in or clock out, GPS coordinates that are clickable would also appear. So there's a lot of information available in Access Online, and you may already be registered. But let's talk through some of those benefits that you may or may not be aware of. Access Online can be used to update your contact information. By clicking on My Account once you are logged in, you can update your email address, your phone number, your contact information. When you log in, you might also see a red box that has an important announcement that can be helpful along with the status of your time. So if you ever have called Access before to say, hey, what's the status of my time? Am I good to be paid? All of that can be seen in Access Online. Even if you have an approved live-in exemption and you still use paper timesheets, once we receive those and have a status, it would be seen in Access Online as well. Now, this is a secure role-based portal, so employers and self-direction assistants, you can also see the budget utilization broken down by pay period and personal support worker. You would also see the expiration dates of the CANTS, which is that annual background check. CANTS does stand for Child Abuse Neglect Tracking System. Again, that's that annual background check that if you're not familiar, the process does require an email moving forward. And new to 2024 is also paid leave balances. Those can also be viewed in Access Online for employers. Workers, you can see, personal support workers, a lot of that same information, such as your CANTS expiration dates and your paid leave balances, which are also available on your full pay stub, which can be seen. You can see your payment method and your full pay stub in Access Online. Now, if you have not already registered for Access Online, it is time to do so. If you have registered, you do not need to register again. So the first step to register for Access Online is to contact Access if you are registering on behalf of a consumer. So if you are your own employer, you are the consumer and you are your own employer, you need to have your consumer ID ready. If you're the employer on behalf of a consumer, you must have that consumer's ID ready. You might already have this. If you do not, please contact us at 877-223-7781 and we can provide your Access consumer ID number. Personal support workers, self-direction assistants, you do not need this. You can skip this first step. You're then going to go to login.mysil.org and please bookmark that because that is the main login page. Then you'll notice below the login button, it says register for an account. So tap on that and then choose the Illinois Department of Human Services from the organization drop-down menu. This builds on what I was talking about earlier. It's next going to ask for the account type. Personal support workers, you're going to choose personal support worker. Employers, you need to choose consumer. You are the employer on behalf of the consumer. Oftentimes you are the consumer and the employer, right? You're the same person. So employers, please choose consumer. You're then going to fill out that registration, making sure you use a valid email address that you have access to. Because after you complete registration, you're going to get an email to the email address you used during registration, and it's going to come from an email called Online Timesheets. Keep in mind that might go to your junk or spam folder. When you open the message, you'll see that there's a link that says click here to verify and set your password. That is what you'd like to click on. If you wait more than 24 hours to click on that link, you will need to contact Access so we can get that resent to you because it does expire. But let's say you click on it within 24 hours. Your next step is to create a password. Now, passwords are the bane of my existence, so this one also cannot be too easy. It needs to have one uppercase and one lowercase letter, one number, and then a special character. So if any of you are in front of a keyboard right now, go ahead and look at the numbers row right above the QWERTY. The numbers 1 through 7. Those are the allowable special characters. So exclamation point all the way through the and or ampersand. Those are the ones that are allowed for a special character. So those are the ones right here. Once you've entered your password the same twice, you click on Reset Password and you have completed registration. Okay, so next what I would like to do is let's go put our personal support worker hat on. Okay, so we are a personal support worker and it is time to register to use the CareAttend mobile application. Employers, self-direction assistants, you do not register in CareAttend. Only personal support workers register to use CareAttend. If you need help downloading the app, we do have videos covering that. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions. You can go to the App Store on your smartphone or smart device. Keep in mind it must be Wi-Fi and GPS capable. So workers, you are the ones who register to use CareAttend. It might be the consumer's phone, the employer's phone, the personal support worker's phone, but the personal support worker is the one who registers. The registration process does require internet, and you'll see why in just a moment. But once you are signed in, internet is not required. You can use this app in airplane mode. Illinois is a prairie state. We know there are just parts of the state that does not have GPS or Wi-Fi reception or cell phone reception. That's not an issue. Once you get back to cell phone or Wi-Fi, it would send your shifts on to ACES, for example. That said, we are here to register. So personal support workers, when you open up the app on the first screen, it says welcome to CareAttend. To get started, tap sign in. That's exactly what you need to do. Then you'll be provided a list to choose your sign-in method, and you want to choose ACES right in the middle and then next. Let's talk about how workers clock in and clock out using the CareAttend app. So the first thing personal support workers you will do is you're going to open up the CareAttend app and then put in your Face ID, fingerprint, or the passcode that you just set. Okay. If you forget your passcode, you can enter that incorrectly 3 times and you'll be prompted to log in again. If you share this device, let's say another personal support worker used it before you and you need to use that device now, you can tap on Not You to log them out and then you can log in. So it's time to clock in. You're going to tap right where it says New Shift. This is the home screen here. It's very clear I have no active shifts. When I'm ready to begin, I'm going to tap on New Shift. So let's tap on New Shift. For many of you, this entire screen would be skipped. If you only serve one consumer and you only deliver one type of service, this is skipped. But if you can provide services to more than one consumer, you would select which consumer you're delivering services to, and then which service type, crisis or attendant. Keep in mind if the consumer must have a crisis award for that service type to appear. So for many of you, both or one or both of these screens could be skipped, and you're taken right here. Are you ready to provide this service type to this consumer? If that looks correct, you're going to tap on Start Shift. If it does not look correct, you can tap on the back button. And pretty much everything in the CareAttend app operates this way. You can go back to fix something or change something. And then the X is here as well. If you're just getting to know the app, you can X out. Now for some of you, you might deliver services to more than one consumer at a time. If that's the case, once you are clocked in, you see I have one shift in progress here, but I need to clock in for a second consumer. I would do that by tapping on the plus new to clock in for the second consumer. Now from here, you do not need to leave the app open. I do think technology is quite smart, but I do recommend before clocking in, opening it a minute or two before, and then after clocking in, keeping it open for a minute or two, just so technology can do its work of getting that location. But otherwise, feel free to force quit. You can turn off your phone. It can work in airplane mode. There's no issue. You do not need to leave it open. Now let's fast forward. It's the end of your shift. How do personal support workers clock out? So we clocked in when our shift began. It's now time to clock out when our shift is ending. And to do that, you're going to open up the CareAttend app, use your Face ID, fingerprint, or passcode to get logged on in, and then you're going to end the shift. So notice here I have one shift in progress. I've been working for 7 hours and 38 minutes. Great work. And right below here, it says end shift. So when it's time to clock out, you open up the app and tap on end shift. If everything looks correct, you're going to scroll down and move towards signatures. But sometimes life happens, and you'll notice I've highlighted this section called Make Adjustments. Maybe my shift started, at 10 in the morning, but it was a rainstorm outside and I left my phone in the car, or maybe I left it at home. Maybe my phone's battery was dead, so I didn't get to clocking in when my shift actually began. So I need to make an adjustment. So if needed, when life happens, adjustments can be made before clocking out. So edits can be made to a CareAttend shift before clocking out. Remember, when adjustments are made, the shift is no longer EVV compliant. So here we are clocking out, and I need to make an adjustment. So to do so, I'm going to tap on Make Adjustments to make an edit. So do not sign off. We should never be signing off on time. Employers, you should never be signing off on time unless it accurately reflects the services delivered. Personal support workers, I'll show you in a moment how you can make an edit to the start date or time or the end date or time if needed. You'll then need to select a reason that the edits were made, and a little orange wrench will appear after edits are made. Then you can move to signatures. So let's take a look at that step by step. So we are clocking out, but that start and end time is not correct. So I am not going to move to signatures. I am going to make an adjustment. Now all of my original times will appear, and my adjusted times, I can enter these in. So the date and time it started, the date and time it ended. So it accurately reflects the shift I delivered. Okay. So let's say in this case, I actually left my phone at home. So here I am at 4:35 and I'm back home and I have my phone and I'm going to adjust the shift back to when I actually worked. Then I'll tap on next. I'll be asked, why am I making this adjustment? And in this example, I forgot my device at home, and I'll save the change. So now my shift has been saved. It should look exactly how my shift was delivered. I started at 10:30, I ended at 1:30, and you'll see these little wrench icons. If I want to see the original times, I could tap on that. So some of you might be asking, well, why is that no longer EVV compliant? Well, let's use this example. Let's say you get home, you clocked in when you were supposed to, you get home, you're sitting on your couch eating your Ben and Jerry's, there's a new flavor out there, and you realize, oh my goodness, Emily talked all about that EVV thing, and I forgot to clock out. So your location was captured when you began your shift. But let's say you ended your shift at 5 o'clock in the evening, and you're sitting on your couch, it's 8 in the evening as you're eating your ice cream. When you clock out, your location would be captured at 8 o'clock when you're sitting on the couch, not when you actually ended your shift. So that's why when you make an adjustment, there's no longer a location associated with that time or date. I hope that helps. Now, once the time and date that began and ended, everything looks correct, personal support workers, you're always going to sign off first. You're going to tap on the tap here to sign in the white box. And again, if anything does not look correct, just simply tap the back arrow to make adjustments. The device will rotate, and you can use your finger, a stylus, your nose, elbow, however you interact with a touch screen. And if you like your signature, you could tap accept. Otherwise, you could tap X and sign again. Now, earlier I mentioned personal support workers are the ones who register and use the CareAttend app. Employers, you do have the option to sign off right then and there if you're available and wanting to. So after the worker signs off, the screen then asks if the employer is available, you can tap employer signature. But notice right below it says unable to obtain employer signature right here. That's okay. That's normal. Maybe the employer took the dog to the vet. Maybe they're in the shower, they're napping, or maybe they just prefer to approve or reject shifts and access online, seeing them all in one place. It's not a problem. So let's go through each of these steps. If the employer is available, the worker will tap employer signature and then hand the device over to the employer. If it looks correct, employers are going to need to scroll down, okay, to make sure everything looks correct. If it looks wrong, give that device back to the personal support worker to make adjustments. Remember, edits to dates or times make that shift an exception, which we do not want to build a habit of doing. If the employer is not available, that is okay. So workers, you're going to tap employer not available. You'll select a reason. Once that reason has been chosen, tap submit. That shift, assuming you're connected to Wi-Fi or cell phone reception, it will be sent to Access Online pending the employer's attention. And this is what that looks like. The shift has ended. You have clocked out when you see a check mark. Whether the employer signs or not, it looks very similar. If the employer does not sign, it says shift submitted. Thank you. Have a great day. If the employer does sign off, it assumes it's not the employer's phone and it's encouraging you to hand it back to the worker. The moral of the story is if you see the check mark, you have successfully clocked out. Okay, let's talk now about how personal support workers add or edit shifts in Access Online. So personal support workers can edit or add shifts in Access Online. Employers and self-direction assistants, you should never be editing or adding shifts. That could be considered fraud, especially SDAs. Shifts that are edited or added directly into Access Online are not EVV compliant. So if you have an approved live-in exemption, yes, you can put your time directly into Access Online. But if you do not have an approved live-in exemption, you should be going to Access Online when life happens, or there was a mistake, or you forgot about a shift, for example. But otherwise, you're viewing and seeing a lot of details in there. So personal support workers, you can edit or add time in Access Online by going to Access Online at login.mysil.org, clicking on Time Entry in the left toolbar, and then enter time. You're going to edit and save time as needed and submit it to your shift to your employer so it's pending their attention. So taking a look at those steps, when you go to the time entry section, you're going to narrow it down by the consumer, the year, and then you do need to select a specific pay period for those action buttons to appear. Once all are selected, the search button will turn green, and you could bring up the shifts that are already there or to add or edit shifts. If you need to add a shift, you'll notice that there's a button called Add Shift at the bottom. It is have a plus add shift. If you're on a mobile device, you might need to scroll down if you have a lot of shifts. So let's say you need to add a shift you forgot about. You're going to tap Add Shift, and then you'll see a vertical pop-up for the date and time that shift began, the date and time that shift ended, the service type, and the reason for adding that after the fact or for adjusting it if it's making an edit. Please note Access Online is automatically going to round the hours worked to the nearest 15-minute interval. That's really helpful as we think about hours per month. So that's going to look very similar when you're editing or adding a shift. So if you tap on Edit or tap on Add Shift, which I'll show more of, it's going to be very similar to that vertical layout. Now, workers, you're going to, if this looks correct, you want to submit this to your employer because notice here the status is unconfirmed. That means draft or saved. So we want to get this to pending our employer's attention. So I would tap on Submit, or if you are in the mobile view, you'd tap to expand the shift and then tap on Submit individually from there. So that's if you'd like to submit these one at a time. You don't have to do that. You can submit all of your shifts at once by tapping Submit All. So any shift in an unconfirmed, which means draft status, you can tap Submit All. You will get a pop-up with an attestation of truth, right? I affirm this was provided, right? This is accurate. By clicking Submit or Submit All, that's going to move that to get to your employer. Now, if you come here and you have a shift that's already there, you don't need to add a shift. You need to edit an existing shift. So you see here, there are 3 buttons. We just tap Submit for an earlier shift, but now we need to edit an existing shift. So I would tap on Edit, and then I could make adjustments and submit that to my employer. But if you are in a mobile view, and you need to edit a shift, What you need to do is see here, there's this box. So the shifts can be stacked in a box like this if you are in a mobile or small tablet view. Well, if you tap anywhere on that box, it's going to expand the shift. You'll see whether or not it's EVV compliant or not. You'll see where that came from, for example, the portal, the ACES Online portal. And then right here is the edit button. Once you tap on edit, it's going to give that same layout, the original versus adjusted, time, date, it began and ended, the service type, and the reason. Once you make all the adjustments, make sure then you submit that to your employer, either by clicking submit or submit all to change the status to pending your employer's attention. What I'd like to do now is switch hats and let's be the employer. Okay. Employers are the ones who approve and reject time in ACES Online. Workers, self-direction assistants should never be approving time. That would be considered fraud. Employers, you have two options to approve time. The first is in the CareAttend app if you're available. So at the time of clock out, so during clock out, as we saw, the personal support worker can hand that device over to you for you to sign off on right then and there. You might not be available though, or you might not prefer to sign off right then and there. So you can, once at the end of each pay period, for example, go into the ACES Online portal, and under time entry, you would go to approve or reject time. So let's go through those steps. So employers, you are the ones who approve or reject time. So you're going to log into ACES Online and click on time entry. And then yours does not say enter time. It says approve or reject time because that is your responsibility as the employer. Please do keep in mind the payroll calendar so you approve time in a timely manner to avoid any delays in payment to the personal support worker. So you're going to tap on time entry in the left toolbar and then approve or reject time. You're then going to narrow it down by the worker, the year, and a specific pay period. And then all the shifts that are in a pending status, you can approve one at a time, you could approve all at once, you can reject one at a time. So let's take a look at those steps. So employers, you are going to review all the shifts that are in a pending status. And those are color coded, so pending typically shows up in orange. So if it is in a pending status and you've chosen a specific pay period, you would see buttons directly next to that shift if you are in the desktop view. And then you could approve or reject those shifts individually or all at once. On the right here, so I'll just do a little highlight. This is the mobile view, right? Small screen view. We see these shifts are in a pending status. So you would tap anywhere in this box to expand that shift to then approve that shift individually. So you can approve shifts one at a time. And then on desktop or mobile view, if you go to the very bottom, you'll see there is an approve all button. Please make sure you review those totals and the rounded hours in detail before approving all to avoid going over your service authorization for PSW hours. What I'd like to do now is go over the shift statuses. Okay. You heard me earlier say the word unconfirmed. You want to think about that like it's a draft, like that is a shift that has been saved. Neither the PSW nor the employer has signed off on that shift. So the next step is to have the personal support worker submit that shift. Once that shift is submitted, it would be pending the employer's attention. We saw that appears in orange. This means the personal support worker signed off on that shift and they have submitted it to their employer so their employer can accept or reject it. So the next step is that the employer accepts or rejects that pending shift. And this is where, Olympic badminton happens or Olympic volleyball, right? We can volleyball back and forth between pending and rejected. Pending, rejected, pending, rejected. A shift is rejected. The employer rejects the shift in ACES Online and it sends it back to rejected status. When the worker submits it, it goes to pending status. So volleyball is back and forth. Only when a shift is in an accepted status. So only when a shift is in an accepted status will ACES import that shift, process that shift at the end of the pay period. So it's really a good best practice to accept shifts according to the payroll calendar so those can be processed in a timely manner for payroll. Sometimes you will see the status called self-rejected. This is when a personal support worker rejects their own shift and it cannot be undone. Now, let's say that has been, those accepted shifts have been swept up, they've been received by ACES, or for the few of you, maybe you're using paper timesheets, you can see the status of that payment of that time in ACES Online. And I want to go through these. The first one is unverified. These are accepted shifts and they are in ACES's possession for processing. And I should just call out, this is in the payment status of ACES Online. All roles have access to this to view that payment status. So if you log in and see that collection of shifts is unverified, it means it's in ACES's possession, waiting to be processed. Well, the happy path is to see that move to OK, which means we've processed it and we're going to run it with the next payroll. And then you'll see it move to posted. 90% of that time, that means payment has been scheduled, and you can see that directly in ACES Online. Workers can see it on their dashboard. For sometimes if time is received late, we do need to work with the state to get permission before payment can be scheduled. That is typically due to time being submitted late. So if you see the time is posted but payment is not scheduled yet, it could be because we're actively working to get that approval from the state. Now let's say you submit your time, but action is required. Maybe it goes over the service authorization, there's some action required. You'll see that status be kick out. There's an issue with the time, and we're going to be reaching out regarding that action required. Let's talk through how that action takes place. So let's say a PSW submits time, a shift that ran too long. The employer approved that accidental too long shift, and oh no, this put the consumer over their service authorization and the timesheet cannot be paid. So you log in, you go to ACES Online to payment status, and you see the timesheet status is kick out. What's going to happen is ACES is going to contact the employer to explain the action required, and we're going to unlock that pay period so all of those shifts that previously were accepted are now unconfirmed or draft. And that allows the personal support worker to make edits in this time entry section of ACES Online to resubmit it to their employer. You might only be editing one shift. You might be editing multiple shifts. Keep in mind that when edits are made to a shift, they are no longer EVV compliant. So ACES, we unlock that timesheet or the collection of shifts, the time. So the PSW logs in, they go to time entry and then enter time. And they make adjustments if needed, that newly edited time, and submit all that time worked in the pay period to their employer. Employers, you then log into ACES Online and you go to approve or reject time. And you review all the time that's pending your attention and any approved time. Every day we are looking for newly approved shifts to process for payment. So next what I'd like to do is talk about the IVR. This is the interactive voice response system, or the landline EVV. Remember when you used to call your bank, press 1 to hear your checking account balance, press 2 to hear your savings account. It works in the same fashion. Now IVR is only available if the CareAttend app is not an option. The CareAttend app can be used in airplane mode. It can be used without cell phone or Wi-Fi connection. It can be used in any setting, but a landline only works around the consumer's home. So keep that in mind. So before using IVR, both the consumer and the personal support worker need to have a registered phone number with ACES. And you're going to do that by going under My Account when you log into ACES Online. Consumers need to put their landline telephone where it says phone number. Personal support workers, for your registered phone number, it could be any phone number. It just needs to be important that you have access to that. You would call to set your PIN from where it is outlined as phone number. So just to say that again, consumers must have their landline listed where it says phone number. PSWs, you should place calls from the phone number if you need to set your PIN if you haven't done that already. So PSWs, you must have your IVR user ID ready. This appears on the dashboard of Access Online every time you log in. Otherwise, you can contact Access. And then before using IVR, PSWs have to set a 6-digit PIN. And you do this by placing a call from you, the PSW's registered phone number. So this is what I mentioned earlier here. So PSWs, to set your PIN, you must call from your registered phone number. But typically that's the only time you're calling from your phone number. You're ideally and most often placing calls from the consumer's registered landline. For my visual learners out there, this is a snapshot of the Access Online dashboard. You notice it says personal support worker. It has the CANCE expiration. And then it also has the IVR user ID that personal support workers use. So personal support workers, once you have your IVR user ID and you've set your own PIN by placing a call from you, the PSW's registered phone number, then you're ready to clock in and clock out. So you're going to contact the IVR system by placing a call to 855-494-0837 from the consumer's registered landline telephone. You're then going to enter your user ID followed by the pound sign, then your 6-digit PIN followed by pound. You'll select the consumer, it'll confirm the start of the shift, and you can hang up. So this is what you do at the start of your shift, and essentially you repeat those steps to clock out. You call the IVR from the consumer's landline telephone. In this case, since both the clock in and clock out came from the consumer's registered telephone number, that landline, this shift would be EVV compliant, assuming you don't make any edits in Access Online after the fact. Then PSWs, you're going to put your user ID and PIN. It's going to say welcome back, and you can follow the prompts and hang up. We have covered a lot of information during this time together, so let me go over a couple key factors, key points for us together. As we think about compliance, what are the EVV compliant methods of entering time? And EVV compliant methods of time entry include live clock in, live clock out using the CareAttend mobile app without making any adjustments, or by using the IVR by placing calls from the consumer's registered landline telephone. There are non-EVV compliant methods of entering time. That would be an EVV exception. That would be paper timesheets, which are not allowable at all unless you have a live-in exemption that's been approved annually. When you make an edit to EVV shifts, it is no longer EVV compliant. If you place IVR calls that are not from the consumer's registered landline, that would be an exception. And any time that's entered after the fact, for example, manually adding that in Access Online. I think this is a really good cheat sheet for everyone out there. If you have an approved live-in exemption, you can enter your time directly into Access Online. For those when life happens and you forgot a shift, this is kind of your cheat sheet. PSWs who have an approved live-in exemption, which is applied for annually, may enter time directly into Access Online. When you do so, workers go to time entry and enter time. You save and submit that time worked in the pay period to your employer. Employers, you log into Access Online, in the left toolbar, go to time entry and click on approve or reject time, and any shifts that are pending your attention, you can accept to get those onto Access for processing or reject if edits are required. We do have user guides and instruction manuals. We have one-page guides. Our videos, if you look at those on YouTube, you can have closed captioning in almost any language available as well. We also do want to stay in touch. There's a variety of ways for that to happen. First is on our Access Illinois page, which I highly recommend bookmarking. We have a lot of resources there available to you. And we do send emails and at times mail if needed as well. And you can keep your contact information up to date by going to the My Account section in Access Online. When you log in, if you see a red box on the dashboard, that's usually a helpful message or tip or alert. You should make sure that you do read that. And you can also access our Document Center and Access Online with or without logging in. That also has links to our packets available in DocuSign, and your service authorization employers, you can also complete those with your SDA using DocuSign.